but because thou art compassionate, purify me by the compassion of thy mercy.
Hello, all Antiochian men in the Diocese of Miami in the Southeast. This is Michael Baclig with another interview in our Amen interview series. We have a very special guest with us for this interview. Today, I have the pleasure of speaking with Emily Wilkinson, President and Executive Director of Orthodox Christians for Life, a pan-Orthodox pro-life ministry organization. Thank you very much, Emily, for joining me today for this interview.
Thank you so much, Michael, for inviting me to participate. It's a real honor.
It's my pleasure. Emily, would you mind starting out by just introducing yourself to the men of our diocese, and please just share a little bit about your background?
Yeah, absolutely. A little of my personal background. I'm 34 years old. My parents converted to Orthodoxy when I was 4 or 5. I currently reside in Southern California. I just got married this year, and we're actually expecting our first child this March. So it's been a big year.
Wow, congratulations, big year.
Thank you. Thank you. As far as my background that pertains to this interview, and my background in the pro-life movement, I have been involved in the pro-life movement, you could say all of my life, just attending events with my parents since I was a small child, but really since I was a student. I started a pro-life club in both high school and college, and just sort of ended up doing all sorts of different things in the pro-life movement. I worked at a pregnancy resource center. I coordinated marches and rallies. I organized prayer vigils outside abortion facilities, and eventually ended up training pro-life students and assisting them with starting pro-life student clubs as the West Coast Regional Coordinator for Students for Life of America. And that position is what brought me to California.
Wow, that's quite a background. I was hoping next you would give us a description of what Orthodox Christians for Life is as an organization, including a brief history of it and how you became involved.
Yeah, well, Orthodox Christians for Life was originally founded back in 1986. It was not incorporated at the time. It was not a federally recognized 501c3. It was just a very grassroots group. But the founders organized the Orthodox presence at the annual March for Life in DC. They printed a quarterly newsletter. They held educational speaking events at various churches. And they were really just focused on educating the Orthodox community on life issues, these bioethical issues, specifically abortion, and end-of-life issues as well. But fast forward to the early 2000s, the group just sort of dissolved, and the founders, started aging. They didn't have new volunteers to pass it on to. It wasn't sustainable because there wasn't a staff. They weren't, fundraising to pay people to continue the ministry.
Right.
So
yeah.
I discovered OCLife, as we like to call it, in college, and I sort of became determined to someday, hopefully, help to restore the organization, because I felt so strongly that it was the missing link between the Orthodox community and the pro-life movement. And eventually, thanks be to God, I was able to meet up with a few other people a few years ago who had the same vision to restore Orthodox Christians for Life. And it was just kind of this long, slow process, as these things are. But over time, that's what we did. We received a donation that sort of launched our efforts, and we incorporated, we became a federally recognized 501c3 charity, and we launched publicly just 1 year ago.
Oh, that's great. I think one of the misconceptions about OCLife, as you called it, and just pro-life ministries in general, is that they're just only focused on ministering to women. But the reality is abortion also has an effect on men. The fathers of the babies who were aborted are impacted very deeply, and full communities of both women and men are affected as well. Can you talk a little bit about your perspective on this?
Yeah, Michael, you're absolutely right. And before I dive into responding to your observations, I do want to just mention a few tangential thoughts I have about men and abortion. So first of all, I just want to say, the irony of the pro-choice movement is that men are told they can't have an opinion about this issue, right? And they have no right to oppose abortion because they can't get pregnant. We've all seen the protest signs, no uterus, no opinion, right?
Yeah, I've heard that
And then of
before.
course, yeah. And of course, my favorite, the accusation that the pro-life movement is just full of old white men,
Mm,
which is just nonsense. Actually, it's comprised mostly of younger people. It's probably majority women, and it's completely diverse, ethnically, politically, every way you can think of. But the reality is that legalized abortion exists because of a Supreme Court full of men, and abortion, frankly, benefits bad men.
mm,
It rewards irresponsible men who can have sex without consequences because there's this backup, this knowledge that if a child is conceived, there's a way out of responsibility, a way
mm.
out of fatherhood, and even a way out of the relationship with a woman. It used to be that sex was much more connected with commitment because it was
Right.
connected with childbearing, right? And now that it's so easy to simply get rid of the problem of the child, sex can be consequence free. So, I mean, the number of women who are told, who become pregnant and are told by the father, you can choose me or the baby. If you don't get an abortion, I'm leaving. I'm out of here.
Wow.
This is so common. And women instinctively know that without the support of a man, it's going to be very difficult to raise a child.
Sure.
For myself, just speaking personally, for the first time experiencing pregnancy myself, just even going through the first few months of pregnancy was very difficult,
Mhm.
with feeling sick and exhausted all the time. And I can't imagine getting through it without my husband. I mean, that was, the baby's not even here yet,
Yeah.
just getting through pregnancy. It's tough. And I think that, just as kind of a personal observation, maybe that's why over half of women who have abortions already have other born children, because not only do they know the joys of bringing new life into the world, they also know the pain and the
Mm,
difficulty involved. So it's extraordinarily difficult for women to resist this kind of pressure and do the right thing. And if if they have to make that choice to choose their baby over the man in this situation. And of course, a lot of times it's more than just pressure, it's full on coercion.
yeah.
And many women say that they feel pressured or coerced into getting an abortion. And of course, do those relationships last? Not usually. A lot of times the men leave anyway. And regardless, um, it's very hard for a relationship to withstand that kind of trauma and move forward afterwards when it was conditional upon killing the couple's child. So a lot of relationships end after an abortion. But of course, what I'm describing is not always the case. And often the situation is somewhat reversed. And many men do not want their girlfriend or wife to get an abortion, but they have
Mhm.
no say in the matter. There's nothing they can do legally, right? It's 100% the woman's decision.
Right.
So a lot of times, um, also often they don't know what to do, so they just go along with it. And as I'm sure that Michael, this is also probably part of your ongoing discussions with amen. A lot of men just need to man up, and men don't know how to be men. And even in the face of a man's girlfriend going into a clinic to kill his own child,
Mhm.
even if he doesn't want that, a lot of times he's not willing to try very hard to stop it. He's going to give up pretty easily because he's been told to stay out of it and that he just needs to support her decision, and that's the
Right.
best thing he can do. Um, so yeah, I think abortion does deeply impact men. It does cause harm and trauma, even if that doesn't extend to the physical realm like it does for women. But certainly the impact is more pronounced when the man doesn't want the abortion in the first place, because like I said, the abortion is the ultimate failure, I think, of a man to do the two things he's created to do, which is protect and provide. So back to your question as to the pro-life movement's response, I would say that probably the vast majority of organizations that are focused on post-abortion healing and recovery are indeed geared toward women. Um, but I do know of at least of one group called Support After Abortion that is trying to bring light to the area of men's abortion recovery, and especially the fact that men deal with and heal from trauma very differently from women.
Mm,
So as for the other end of the spectrum, helping men and women in crisis to avoid abortion in the first place, some local pregnancy resource centers actually do offer special mentoring and fatherhood programs, specifically for men, to help them prepare for fatherhood and support the mothers. So I think it's understandable that most outreach is directed toward women, because they're obviously the most clearly impacted, and
Sure.
ultimately the choice does lie in their hands. But when it comes to men, I think we really have to back up, because by the time a couple is experiencing a crisis pregnancy, it it might be too late to reach the man. I think where we need to have an impact is with men comes earlier. I think it comes with teaching boys to be responsible and teaching them how to treat women, and certainly teaching them that sex always comes with responsibility and the possibility of a child being conceived.
Yeah, that's a great response, Emily. And a couple of things really resonated with me that you mentioned. First of all, that we have to man up, right? And we have to fulfill our roles, especially when we're talking about fatherhood. But also, I think that one of the key points is that responsibility piece. And, in the Antiochian men, we talk a lot about the spiritual crisis that men are facing in our culture, especially young men. And if you research the origins of that crisis, and I have, a lot of the signs point us to that sexual revolution in the 60s that took place, right? That has kind of been wrecking havoc with us ever since, and especially with men and men who are kind of coming of age. Abortion was the cause that second wave feminists united around, and the result was essentially the ripping apart of the family unit. So before men were under full assault in our dominant culture, women were really targeted, and many have been deceived by, in my view, a very demonic ideology. In your opinion, what's the best way for both men and women to fight back against this ideology in the Orthodox Church?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. The sexual revolution really destroyed everything. And you're right about how it deceived women. And I just want to comment on that because this is a fun question
Sure.
to talk about. But yeah, it was built around this lie that women still believe today, that women could be empowered through being free sexually,
Mm,
without the encumbrances of that sex places upon women more than men, namely bearing children, right? And
right.
so um, women have essentially bought into this lie that ultimately the male body is normative. And just think about that. Women actually believe that they are slaves to their fertility,
Mm,
that pregnancy is akin to a disease or being shackled and held down. That to be equal, these things need to be suppressed and need to be destroyed. And but this view of womanhood is absolutely saying that men are superior. So talk about misogynistic.
right.
It's just so ironic. I mean, the that the male ability to have sex without as much emotional attachment or to have sex without getting pregnant is normative. That's calling it superior essentially.
Yeah. Yeah, it
And
is.
even the tradition, even like things like the tradition of men working outside the home is superior to working inside the home, maybe as a full-time mother or a part-time mother. Of course, obviously, I'm not bashing women in the workplace or anything like that. And clearly, I have a professional job, and I plan to continue to work while parenting. But rather than asking society to support and conform to the normal needs of womanhood and childbearing and motherhood, instead, feminism has largely asked women to conform to society and to a man's world and to act like men.
Yeah.
And I just think that's a real tragedy because you're right, women are so deceived. So, to get to your question, how can we best fight back against the demonic ideology that has come out of the sexual revolution as Orthodox Christians? I think the number one way is to live out the example of the good and beautiful Christian expression of life and sexuality that we are wanting to promote. So, what does that mean? It means giving up pornography, practicing chastity, getting married and staying married, having children, viewing child rearing as a good and holy task, not a part time hobby, which it seems like so much of our culture does, and helping your children to lead holy lives by example. And speaking to men specifically, being real spiritual leaders in the home. I know that according to some research, the father's church attendance and practicing of his religion actually is more important than the mother's as far as being an indicator of children's church attendance and religious practice and moving into their future. So I think our best shot at transforming the culture is probably by raising the next generation with a better and more Christian culture.
That's a great response as well. Thank you, Emily. You did an interview with Father Andrew Stephen Damick a little over a year ago for the Orthodox Engagement podcast. I heard that interview for the first time a few months ago, and I must admit, until then, I had never heard of OCLife. You mentioned in that interview that you had just relaunched OCLife after many years of being dormant. How's it been going over this past year, and what have you been focused on?
Yeah, well, first of all, we've been focused on just getting the word out. So just laying a foundation of, telling people that we're here, we're back, and we're ready to support the Orthodox Church and the Orthodox community with regards to abortion and these issues. We've kind of had three major initiatives or accomplishments, I guess, this year. The first is that we launched a Parish Ministry Program. So with this program, we help churches to start pro-life ministries, affiliated ministries. So they're called, Orthodox Christians for Life of St. Paul Church, or whatever your parish is called.
Right.
And we provide resources and support and training to them to support them in this ministry. And as part of that, kind of our second big initiative was last June, we encouraged our parish groups to hold a baby shower. Or rather, I should call it more like a diaper drive, but we called it the National Orthodox Baby Shower. And we encouraged all of our parishes to collect baby items and diapers and things that were needed by their local pregnancy resource centers. So they got connected with these wonderful centers that provide free medical care and free resources and materials to women in crisis pregnancies, and supported them with a large donation of these goods. So we kind of had this coordinated effort. All of our churches were doing this at the same time. And the third initiative that we had this year was encouraging our parish groups to participate in 40 Days for Life. So 40 Days for Life is an international prayer campaign that takes place twice a year, every fall and every spring, all over the world, in cities across the United States and countries across the globe, where local communities gather together and hold 40 days of prayer and peaceful vigil outside of their local abortion facility. So we saw this need that, the Orthodox community is kind of absent from this wonderful effort. And how can we get the Orthodox churches to get involved? Because it's a very Orthodox initiative. Prayer, fasting, public witness, this is all these things are what we do as Orthodox Christians.
Sure.
So we encouraged our parishes to participate. We collaborated with 40 Days for Life to create a guidebook that sort of walks people through how to involve an Orthodox parish specifically in this initiative. And we hope to promote that again this spring for the upcoming 40 Days for Life campaign in March. So those were kind of our big accomplishments this year. Just, watching the momentum build as people learn about Orthodox Christians for Life and are excited to have a way to get involved that is Orthodox has been really exciting, because we're filling a big need and people really are excited about it, which makes me really glad.
That's great. You're definitely filling a big need, and it sounds like it's been very successful even in the first year. So I'm really glad to hear that. In that same interview that I mentioned that you did with Father Andrew, you shared that if somebody becomes pregnant in a religious setting, there's more temptation to pursue having an abortion than in a secular setting. I found that part of the interview very interesting, and I was hoping you could maybe explain why this is.
Yeah, in a religious setting, specifically talking about Christian churches, Orthodox or otherwise, there's an expectation that you will remain a virgin until you're married, and obviously if you are married, that you will not cheat on your spouse. But getting pregnant, whether you are unmarried or getting pregnant by someone who is not your spouse, obviously exposes sin.
Yeah.
So there's this big temptation to hide that, to cover up the sin through abortion. And sometimes it's not even about the the girl or the woman, but maybe her family, the embarrassment that that could cause for the
Right.
parents,
Yeah.
or being ashamed, I mean, I've heard so many stories of uh, young women being essentially forced to have abortions by their parents
Mm,
who did not want that embarrassment,
yeah.
the matter of, it's a matter of the social status thing, where, like, oh, your child messed up. And I mean, some churches will shun you if you
Mm,
are in this situation. So a lot of parents are willing to force their daughter to go through a traumatic procedure that will kill their grandchild just to get out of that, which
yeah.
is really, really sad. But in a secular setting, sex outside of marriage is widely accepted. So you just don't have that layer of
Mm.
complication. You don't have that issue to deal with.
Yeah, and it really speaks to, in some ways, what I think could be, I don't know if I would say it's a flaw, but just one of those weak points in some churches and the culture of maybe that community of wanting to put forward, the image of this perfect family, right? When none of us are in a perfect family, but there's this perception maybe that, if we can just look a little bit better on the outside, then, our sins won't be as obvious. I find that it's a very sad reality that that does happen, but I think it's something we should be aware of, especially in parishes where we don't have a pro-life ministry. And I wanted to talk to you a little bit more about just pro-life ministry in general. Some people might be hesitant to get involved in a pro-life ministry since abortion is perceived as just such an emotionally charged issue that's been deeply politicized over the years, I would say. What would you say to people who may be hesitant to becoming active in a pro-life ministry such as OCLife for this reason?
Yeah, I would respond that abortion is first and foremost a moral issue. So a lot of moral issues are politicized,
Yeah.
but that shouldn't stop anyone from taking action in a Christian manner. Just look at slavery in our not too distant past in our nation, which was highly controversial and political. It was widely accepted and defended, even by many so called Christians.
Yeah.
But aside from the controversy between the anti-slavery and pro-slavery sides, there was even controversy within the abolitionist movement itself about what was the best way to end it. But regardless, many Christians did actively oppose it. They spoke out against it. They helped people to escape slavery, etc. And I think we need to look at their example and just ignore the politics if that bothers us, and focus on the fact that abortion is literally a life or death issue. It is, in reality, the poisoning or ripping apart of a baby in the womb. It is one of, if not the most important moral issues of our day, I think, in our country, certainly. And I think we will answer for it someday. And so we need to keep that in mind, that, when we are asked to rescue those being led away to the slaughter, what does that mean in our modern day context? And this is a really blatant example of how we can get involved in doing just that.
Yeah. I've heard you also describe abortion really as the biggest human rights issue today that exists. And I think you even mentioned that in the interview with Father Andrew, and I completely agree. And if we think about it that way, maybe that can help us to want to take the first steps of taking action. And in that interview, there was one other thing I wanted to bring up. To me, the most shocking part of that interview with Father Andrew was when you talked about the results of a 2014 Pew Reform survey of religious people in America, and that included Orthodox Christians. The survey found that 53% of Orthodox Christians who responded said that abortion should be legal in all or most cases. Based on those results, there just seems to be an obvious education gap in the church on this topic. And what are some of the ways that OCLife can help to reduce this percentage?
Yeah, it certainly is our long-term goal to reduce this number. I have no way of knowing for sure, but I suspect that a great part of the problem lies with the fact that abortion is a lot of times simply being swept under the rug and just not
Mm,
addressed. And if it is addressed, it's so infrequent that it gives people the impression that accepting the church's teaching on it is optional in some
mm,
way. So I think first and foremost, we just want to bring the issue out in the open, out from under the rug. And so a few ways to do that. I think one is that we need to dispel negative stereotypes of the pro-life movement that may contribute to people's confusion on this issue. And we can do that by bringing the pro-life movement into our parishes through, for example, through our Parish Ministry Program and various initiatives that we hope to offer the Orthodox community. Another one is that we need to equip priests and seminarians to have the tools that they need to address the issue of abortion confidently and be able to competently respond to the concerns of pro-choice people. Another one is just simply providing education. And we hope to do that through the Parish Ministry Program, through our partnerships with other pro-life organizations, to provide, educational resources and training in pro-life apologetics. And that's kind of something that's coming soon for us, but also educating the next generation. So we hope someday to have some sort of curriculum to offer, Sunday school curriculum, supplemental resources and materials, for Sunday schools or youth groups or summer camps. That's a long way off, but that's something that we hope to bring as well.
Yeah, no, that sounds great. I was hoping you would also talk a little bit more about the OCLife Parish Affiliation program that you mentioned earlier. And I was hoping you would talk about what are the focuses of that program, and also maybe what your goals are for this going forward over the next few years, maybe at a macro level, what you hope that it develops into.
Yeah, well, so the Parish Ministry Program is just a way for us to unite the Orthodox pro-life community and be able to represent Orthodoxy in the pro-life movement and represent the pro-life position within Orthodoxy. So every parish that starts Orthodox Christians for Life ministry basically has 3 tasks ahead of them. They need to hold one activity each year in prayer, one in service, and one in education. And so those kind of are the goals of the parish groups. That number one, you are involving the entire church in praying about this issue, because of course that's our foundation as Christians, as Orthodox people, and that's what we build everything else on, right? Number 2, you are going to work to educate your parish, even in some small way, whether that's holding a pro-life movie night for a youth group, or bringing in a speaker, or just in some small way bringing the issue up and again out into the open, getting the discussion going. And then service, so engaging the Orthodox community in pro-life ministry to women in crisis. And we do that through partnerships with existing organizations. There's this great infrastructure in the pro-life movement that already exists. There's nearly 3,000 pregnancy resource centers around the country that offer these wonderful free resources to women in crisis, women and men in crisis. And all we need to do is get plugged in with them and find out what their needs are and support them. And that's how we can help these women, through the experts, through people that are already doing it, through these wonderful groups. So the goal is, the long-term goal is what we already talked about, just changing that statistic, so that more Orthodox people are aligned with the church's teaching on abortion. And beyond that, not only are they aligned, but they're doing something about it. They're engaged, because like you said, like we talked about, this is one of the greatest human rights issues of our day. And I think it is to our shame as Orthodox people that we are not leading efforts in this area. It really does not reflect well on us, frankly. We can't leave it to the Catholics and Protestants any longer. I think it's time for us to really step up and take charge.
Amen to that. You're speaking to the choir for sure.
Yeah, I know I am. Yeah. So, I mean, those are our long-term goal, is to change that number and to just bring the Orthodox community into the pro-life movement, so that we make up a bigger portion of the movement, of those who are doing something about it.
Yeah, no, that's a great goal for sure. There may be people watching this video who would like to start an OCLife chapter in their local parish. or they may even know someone at their church that would just be that perfect person to lead such an effort. What are the first steps they should take, and what resources are currently available?
Yeah, the first step would just be to go straight to our website, and that is OCLife.org. You can go straight to the page that describes the Parish Ministry Program and everything that we provide. That's OCLife.org/Parish Ministry Program. And you can read about some of the things that we offer, some of the requirements, and then at the bottom of the page, there's a button to apply. So there's an application process. You fill that out, get the blessing of your priest, and then we'll be in touch. And we will call you up and have a conversation about what your goals are for your own parish, what need you see for this ministry, and how we can help you get started. Then you would sign an affiliation agreement, you, your priest, and it would be an agreement between your parish and the national organization, sort of just establishing that relationship on a formal basis. And then we send you a free banner with our logo with your parish's name across the bottom. We will send you free resources. We will have occasional webinars and Zoom meetings for parish ministry leaders. And you just have those 3 requirements that every year you need to hold an activity in prayer, one in service and one in education. That's kind of the bare minimum, but we're going to be providing a lot more materials and resources over time to help you do more than that. So it's, don't feel intimidated if it's something that you think you might be interested in, but you've never been involved in the pro-life movement or pro-life ministry of any kind. That's okay. It's an easy way to get started. We'll support you every step of the way. And it's something that your parish needs. I believe that because I think it's something that every parish needs.
Yeah, I completely agree with you, Emily. One other thing I wanted to ask you, there may be some people watching this video that would like to help your organization out financially. If someone wanted to donate to OC for Life or OCLife, how do they do that?
That would be wonderful. You can donate on our website, oclife.org/donate. There's also an address there to mail us a check if you'd prefer, but credit card, check, or bank transfer. You can mail us cash. We would really appreciate the support. We are just, getting started, kind of still in that stage of wanting to make sure that this is sustainable, that, it is an effort that the Orthodox community wants to get behind, and it's not going to dissolve in a few years because it's something that that people will support and ensure that it will continue.
Oh, that's wonderful. Thanks for sharing that. I do want to end this interview by just sharing that my local parish, St. Nicholas Church in Springdale, Arkansas, we just started an OCLife chapter a couple of months ago. It's been such a blessing already to my parish, and we're all so excited to see what we can accomplish together with OCLife in our community. Even though we're in the early going, it's obvious to me that there's so much value in getting started with the OCLife Parish Affiliation Program, and I highly recommend that everybody watching this video pursues getting one started in their own parish as soon as possible. And again, it may not be you who are watching this video, but talk to somebody who you think might be that perfect fit and let them know about OCLife. Emily, I've really enjoyed speaking with you today, and I want to thank you for joining us in this interview. And on behalf of the Antiochian men in our diocese, thank you for all that you do for OCLife, and please keep up the good work.
Thank you so much, Michael.
To all Antiochian men out there, we have many more compelling interviews planned just like this one, and they'll be coming your way very soon. Please remember to subscribe to our Amen YouTube channel if you haven't already, and share our videos with anyone you feel might benefit from them. Our videos can also be viewed on our website at antiochianmen.org. We frequently update that website, including listing our upcoming virtual and in-person events, so check back often. We also have a brand new podcast for the men that is called Coming Out of Chaos. That podcast is on our website and on all major podcast platforms. Please help us get the word out about that podcast by sharing it with the men in your parishes. We also encourage you to visit the Orthodox Christians for Life website at oclife.org to learn more about that organization, and please support them as you are able to. And once again, thank you very much, Emily, for being with us today.
Thank you so much, Michael, and thank you for all that you do as well.
Prepare for me the ways of salvation. O For I have profaned my whole life with procrastination. But by thine intercessions, purify thou me from all abomination.